Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by and welcome to the Cattleya Type Series, part 2, where we play What's in My Pot, which in one case is going to take 10 seconds because it's not in a pot. But boy have we had some fun with this one. I love it when things are a bit of a challenge, and as you go along the way you learn some things, and in this case stuff I'd never heard of before. Right, so the Laelia cross turns out to be an awful lot more special than the special I thought it was. Stop wobbling, people can't see you. Right, so the label said Laelia rubescens, got no problem with that, crossed with Brassavola negrilensis. So I hadn't heard of that, so we typed that in and our survey said no such thing. But what there is a Broughtonia negrilensis. Now I don't think I've come across a Broughtonia before, so we did a bit of work around that, and it sits alongside two other Cattleya types, a Laelionia, never heard of it, and a Cattleyonia, never heard of it. And between those three names there's only about 6 species, and some are incredibly rare. Now obviously those names were given to the plants when they were first discovered and described by whoever discovered them, many moons ago no doubt, although I didn't check that. But basically those three are now accepted as synonyms, and the most commonly used name is Broughtonia. So I'm happy that this is Broughtonia negrilensis, and the other part of it is Laelia rubescens. So we do have a primary cross, I'm happy with all that. But then I did a bit more work, and although the label said Laelia rubescens crossed with the other one, if you turn those two round the other way, it's actually registered. Now I can't absolutely say that I've got that registered version, because if the cross was done the other way round it's not the same plant. Yeah, but it's highly likely that it was done this way round, because with two quite unusual plants going into the cross, if you'd done it the other way round and been successful, you'd only have half a brain if you didn't register that, because it's the sort of cross I doubt if many people are ever going to do for a start. So you get your name on the RHS register and all that. So if the cross is this way round, Broughtonia negrilensis crossed with Laelia rubescens, then it is Laelonia Joyce Hilton. That took a bit of work, that lot. And then, like I always do, if I've got a primary cross or a species cross with a hybrid, I try and get back to some species or the pair that made the whole thing possible. And I look up where they come from, what sort of environment, to get an inkling of the care they might need. And therein lies another problem. This Laelia grows quite high up. It's a relatively cool grower. Now I've found in the past that nonetheless they are still quite temperature tolerant, so I'm not particularly worried about that, but it does have some strange traits. It would normally bloom in autumn towards winter, and where it comes from, it goes quite dry for some time around that period. So the Laelia in this needs a dry rest after blooming, and also it should cool down. Yeah, but then what it's mixed with doesn't. So you have to sort of average. So it's just going to get stuck in with the rest of the Cattleyas. But the Laelia is often found in full sun. This is one of those, if it doesn't get the bright light, it probably won't bloom. The Broughtonia, it's difficult to find out the sort of light levels and whether it is one of these really high light types. The mix of the two I'm quite happy that I will give it the brightest light I can. The other thing with the Laelia is it does not like wet roots under any circumstances. They will keel over. All the places I've read about that, it recommends mounting over potting, and it recommends a fast wet dry cycle, and in its resting period hardly any water at all. The only problem I haven't found is how long that resting period might be. So we had some fun with this one. Now, as far as what's in my pot is concerned, we've already looked at this. It's not really in a pot. It's in this coconut shell, which is rock hard. Now, I've had several plants like this before, and I was lucky with the other couple because this was rotting and it crumbled and it came away quite easy. I'm not going to do this now, because if there are any roots that go with these two new growths that have bloomed, unfortunately they've gone down inside the pot. My only sign of hope, which is probably too small to see, if you look on the very end of my finger, there is something growing out of that, which is probably the oldest pseudobulb on the plant. It could be roots. It could, in theory, be a new growth, but it's tiny and as yet undetermined. Now, this, as far as I'm concerned, is quite a special plant. The chances of me ever coming across it again, I would say, are 0. I don't want to lose it. And at the end of the day, the two latest growths are not close enough to the edge to actually, well, bashing the flowers around here, for any new roots to have come outside. This growth here, some roots came outside, but this growth here, the other one with the bloom on, the roots have gone down inside this rock hard shell, which probably means they're stuck to the inside of it and they're going to get damaged when I repot this. So I'm holding this for some considerable time. The only thing I might do is see how crumbly this is. That is, I watered this, I gave it a really good soak to see how soft this is. I don't want to repot it now, but I wouldn't mind exposing some roots. It specifically says this Laelia does not like its roots enclosed. Where it's found growing, yeah, the new roots have grown down into it as well as up the inside. I really would like to break some of it off and just allow some roots to get some air. But I can't go too mad, I will end up doing damage. Like these roots have grown right down through it, through the centre. And this is not something you can wash off, I'm afraid. We can't get this under the tap. But we do have some good roots down inside. And just by taking some of this off, hopefully they can be able to dry. Let's see if this big bit will crumble as well. Oh, this bit's a bit harder. This is a bit more sturdy. This may not break. But you can see what I'm doing. I'm just gently trying to get some of this off to expose some of the root system and let some air in round the base of this plant. If it does happen to push up a few new roots after this treatment, they'll hang in the air. And I'd prefer that at the moment. I don't think I'm going to be able to do much more than that without starting to tear roots off. It's very delicate. And if a piece of this is firmly attached to the base of the pseudobulb, chances are it's got a couple of roots holding it there. So I don't think I can do much more than this. Just teasing at the moment. Now around this side, I doubt if there's many roots at all. This is the older part of the plant. This may come off a bit. Oh, there are roots down in here, and you see how they attach and come off. I did say there would be some root loss, but I am managing to get some roots exposed, which is all I really want to do at this point. I'm not going much further than this. I am going to start doing some more serious damage. Yeah, see the roots, how the ends come off quite easily. That's allowed a bit more air in there than there was before. This big bit up here, will you come off gently? See, the roots come off with it. There is a lot of roots though. It's not rootless by any means. So it was obviously relatively happy in here, but it just can't stay in there. The reason being, this stuff just disintegrates. Eventually it just breaks down and it rots. And it happens quite quickly when it does go. Feels quite soft already. Well, that should allow the roots to get a bit more air around them, and also with some air around them, this stuff is going to dry quicker. It's specifically said in several places this plant, the Laelia element, does not like its feet wet. Oh, marvellous. We've either got a hell of a bunch of snail's eggs, or we've got some slow release fertiliser in the centre here. Oh, the way it's crumbling, it's slow release fertiliser granules. Well, I want that out for a start. I don't like that stuff. You tend to get a hot spot where they start dissolving. Any roots in close proximity are liable to burn. It can work, you know, it'll probably be quite good for outside growers where they get rained on a lot, you know, and it's difficult to keep your plants fed when everything you put in the pot gets rained off. Right, so what we've got now is some better exposed roots, a little bit of root damage. What I'm doing now is just trying to break it into pieces rather than take it off, if you see what I mean. But we've got a reasonable root system. I think I've got most of that slow release stuff out. Yeah, there's now a hollow up underneath the plant, so it will be drying from the centre outwards as well as from the outside. I'm happy with that. I'm just going to leave it at that for now. I've got a lot more visible roots now, and I can keep my eye better on the root system. Now, if these roots start growing actively and branching, I might take a risk and repot it earlier than I would have planned. I'd like to wait for new growths to push out new roots, but if I can do it earlier, I will. So we will just keep our eye on this. I've got a lot more off than I expected to. I'd love to be able to just get the base of the plant clear, but I don't think I can. But we've got a fair bit of it off. Yeah, I think we're at the point where we need to stop fiddling and let it go. So we've got a lot more roots exposed now, as they would be on a mount. Yeah, and if they start to branch and I see active growth in that root area, I may go the whole hog and do the whole flipping plant, but that's as much as I'm prepared to do now. I have got some root tips that haven't been damaged, so it's a matter of do they come back into growth or not. And we'll leave it at that for now, I think, and we'll see what happens next. So no repot. This is going to be mounted. There's no discussion about that. It's going on a mount. The type of environment it comes from and the writings I've found specifically say does not do well in a pot. So we won't put it in a pot, will we? It could quite honestly live in there, an open basket. But then for it to stand upright, it would have to go in a heavy pot to stand up, and it's far more difficult for me to give the brightest light possible in a pot. It's much easier to do in a mount where it can just hang up in the roof, you know, and right in the glass. Highest light I can give it. So we do have a reasonable root system, but I bet you anything if it stayed in there much longer, as this stuff is already crumbly, that would have rotted and taken out a fair bit of that root system. So we'll gently pop it back in its little basket so it's got something to sit in, and then put it inside its other pot, which I'm going to change for a clay pot. Yeah? So that's that one. An unusual orchid, to say the least. Now this one's got a really, really unusual name. It's called Cattleya Hybrid, and that's probably how it's going to have to stay. But we can play what's in my pot with this one. It may well be, when I get it out of this plastic pot, it's going to look exactly the same as the other one. But since I got this Saturday, the other buds are opening. They've just started to open. I don't know how much longer these are going to last. These are showing signs of age. But now oh, that fragrance is almost overpowering. Brilliant. What I can do now is update my notes to say that the blooms opened yesterday. Yeah, now I know those were already open, but that gives me a timer then, so we can see how long these blooms last. Otherwise I wouldn't know. I just put it in my notes with question marks if it's already in bloom, because I don't know when they opened. So we'll lift this out and see what we've got. And I highly suspect we might have another one just like that that's had some bark push around the outside. No, actually we haven't. First of all, we've got a hell of an air cone. That's in bark, with a hell of a gap up through the middle. That's a hell of an air cone. That's good. It's a Cattleya. It needs air around its roots. But, as suspected, in the middle of the plant, it was grown in exactly the same way. So in the middle of there is one of these encasing the centre of the root system, which, the fact that it's been enclosed, is probably containing nothing more than dead roots. And that's how it's going to have to stay. So I'm just looking at where the new growths are. This is a new growth. Some of those roots have pushed down nicely. Some others on the surface have failed. They've lost their growing tip. But this is the oldest part of the plant, is where this sort of fibrous plug is, and that probably wouldn't have viable roots anyway. What I'm doing is seeing if I can poke it down through the hole in the middle and get a lot of it out. It's not required, and having air around Cattleya roots doesn't matter. Having them jammed in and compacted in sphagnum moss really doesn't do them any good. So I'm just trying to get the moss out that I can see. I won't be able to get it all. I won't be able to get that weed while I'm at it. Yeah, these roots are gone in this area. But not to worry, there's plenty of others. So that's not bad. Load of dead ones in the centre. I think I've got most of that plug out. I wonder how old this bark is. That's niffy. That's not good. I think I'm going to have to take the chance and repot that. That is quite smelly. So it's going. Not gone, but going. And if it stays much longer like this, if I have to wait for the next set of new growths, that could be 6 months before I get a new root system to go with those new growths. So I think I'm going to take the risk with that one and tease as much of this off as possible. And it's a compact plant, it could take them out. But being Cattleya hybrid with no ID and no idea what's in it, I don't know whether it's an incredibly highlight one or just an ordinary highlight one. And with a mix like this, it's just impossible to tell what went into this. Lots of dead roots in here, but some good active roots, especially in this area. This is where the 3 or possibly 4 new growths are. In bloom, just opened, not going to bloom, and probably will, got a sheath. So this is the new root area, some of which have grown and been lost. They may still branch. Yep, so I'm just going to drop that back in there for now, because this is the what's in my pot video, not the repotting video. And I'll stand it back in its clay pot for now, so it don't keep falling over. I'm sure this stuff works well for a while, but not once it starts breaking down. And it's cheap, readily available in its origins. Costs nothing. Collect it on the blinking ground under the trees, so it's like free. You can understand why it gets used, and in its place it's probably wonderful, but once you get it over to the UK it's not so good. It just stays wet too long. So there we are then, that's the two Cattleya type, and what I plan to do with them, and a look round the pot. One case in the pot and the other one around it, and we'll go from there. The only thing I did notice with this is the depth of colour between the two blooms. This is a much, much deeper colour than this one, these that have just opened. In addition, the lovely frilly deep purple lip does not have any pale edging. Well, it does when they're newly opened, so it looks like it could be a bit of a colour changer. And this colour, which is nowhere near as nice as this one, may deepen as the blooms open and start to age and end up like this. I don't see why they shouldn't. So yeah, that's the what's in my pot for the two Cattleya types, and one of them has been established as something incredibly unusual. We must not lose that plant. I mean, although I could, you know, if I lost this plant, I could go and get another one incredibly similar easily. Even if it wasn't exactly the same, it would be very, very close. The more complex Cattleya hybrids are common as muck, but that one I probably won't ever come across again, so I don't want to lose that. So there we go, some names, and a look round what's in the pot. And the next one we'll be repotting. There's a huge earwig in there. Well, that's obviously come out of the pot. Cheers. Now we've got to ask ourselves, is that an earwig from the UK? Or is that an earwig from where these were imported? Yeah? Now you see why plants should be clean before they start travelling across countries. As long as there's nothing in them pots with 8 legs, I don't mind. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.